So thank you, Erik and Suzanne, for that great introduction, because you talked about a lot of things in there that I'm going to try to hit. And this is going to go really, really fast. Um, so anyways, just a little background uh, about me. When I was a young child, my mother was divorced and I was the youngest of 5 children and the only girl. And I lived a lot with my grandmother, and my grandmother had lost her first husband in a logging accident. And her second husband was divorced, and her third had cancer. She was a very strong woman. And I think that um, strength and courage that she faced going through World War II and the Depression, and it really helped her help my mother as a single mother with 5 kids and 4 being teenage boys who loved to eat. So I grew up with my grandma, and but when I was in the 5th grade, my grandma and grandpa and my mother and older brothers went and worked in the orchards and were gleaning fields, and they sent me to live with my aunt on a farm in northeastern Washington. And that's where I learned how to milk cows and hunt for chicken eggs and catch chickens to process them and boil water outside on fire. Um, Anyways, my aunt had a little cabin up in the woods, and it was like a little house on the prairie dream for me at that time. And I had 3 girl cousins. Um, and we did a lot of farm chores. We had no electricity. Um, there was lanterns, hurricane lanterns and candles and a flashlight, because there was an outdoor privy or outhouse. Um, and there was no running water. So after they were done gleaning, and we moved back down to Southern Oregon with my grandparents, and they were producing a 1-acre homestead in city limits, and they had multiple fruit trees and varieties and berry bushes, grapevines, um, a huge garden. And I mean, huge, probably in, I don't know, not quite a quarter of that acreage was garden, and fruit trees and nut trees, walnuts, almonds, filberts, all that. Anyway, so I grew up with a grandma who preserved everything. My grandfather and my family helped them build a house from the bricks up with the Back to Basics book. And it was a very nice house. And it had electricity and running water and all the amenities. So that was wonderful. And but grandma also still, she washed her clothes and hung them out on the clothesline, because there was a whole row of rose bushes there. So the laundry always smelled wonderful. So after a while, my grandpa had cancer and lost employment. And after surviving surgery and treatment, they decided to move closer to my aunt back in Northeast Washington. And I mean, just down the hill. And their property did not, my aunt's house had burnt down. And during this time that we were away, so she had a new home that the community and family and friends had helped her with, and they had gotten electricity and running water and indoor plumbing during that time. But when we moved into the cabin grandpa was building down below, we had a spigot 50 feet outside the house. And we had bathroom appliances, but they weren't hooked up to plumbing yet. We had no water heater, and we did not have, we had an electric cord running down the hill from my aunt's house for electricity until that was put in as well. So that created quite an adventure. At that time, I was 12 and 13, and I learned how to carry lots of water buckets into the house throughout all seasons. And up there that winter, we had over 2 feet of snow, so that was exciting. Um, and it was a very cold cabin because my grandfather didn't have the money or means or the mental capacity was also slipping, and so he insulated the walls of the cabin with cardboard. So we, uh, did a lot of, heating with wood, and that's how we heated our water and all of that. But throughout all of this, my grandmother she had a large garden with deer fencing all around it, being in the country. Um, and we preserved everything, and I was chief bottle washer with the small hands. So, um, the reason I'm telling you this is because I'm sure many of you, if you look back in your family history, it wasn't that long ago that we didn't have refrigerators and freezers and washers and dryers. Um, my grandmother never pressure canned. She canned everything with a water bath canner. And now we have new and pressure canners, new technology, and new scientific studies on how to process foods safer. And there's also newer equipment that she probably would have loved, and I'll hint on that later. So, anyways, that's my little segue there. And even though um, these were childhood experiences that I had as an adult, when I wanted to start my little teeny tiny quarter-acre homestead, while homeschooling my kids and raising rabbits and chickens and canning and gardening, I had to learn all these things over as an adult, because it's just a little different when you're the one responsible, to not kill your family with food poisoning. So I wanna talk about some different, ways to store things. Right now, um, and hopefully you'll see my first slide, preparing ourselves. Yeah. Preparing ourselves to live happily without electricity, one skill at a time. I didn't learn all that I know now all at once. That would have been way too overwhelming. Just like our ancestors a little over a century ago, we too can learn to preserve real food without refrigeration and not smell like a caveman.
So I've got the opening slide up. Everybody see it okay? Ask me.
Yes, it looks great. Thank you. Perfect.
Okay.
And then in the next slide, can you live without refrigeration? So when the power goes out here, when we have a winter storm, we see that first picture. And that first picture, the freezer is just melting. Upright freezers are not as resilient as chest freezers. Okay, so they lose their cooling capacity quickly in a power outage. And you can help that by putting in water bottles that are frozen to kind of keep some of that cold down. But if you have a chest freezer and an upright freezer and you have room, move what you can from the upright into the chest freezer and pack that chest freezer. And this is only temporary, okay? Because if it's a power outage for a long time, we're going to be getting into the other things that we're going to do. So your refrigerator, you're going to go through stuff. And don't open it unless you know exactly what you want and you can do it quickly and get out whatever you need for that meal at that time. So eat the most perishable things first. And if you want, and it's full and you have a bunch of coolers, you can sit there and sort your foods out into those coolers. I have a blue one. I have a red one. I think I have several red ones and a couple blue ones. So anyways, you can sort that out and put frozen water bottles in there. And you can also put those water bottles on the top because cool air sinks. The bottom, well, my bottom left shows you a refrigeration system that can work off solar and battery power. And it's often used in boats in yachts and sailboats and things like that. So the middle bottom picture is a cellar, and we'll switch over here. Dave's going to try to come and bring the camera a little closer.
Stop sharing the screen.
And you got to do it quick, honey. And so it's important you know that there are things that don't need to go in your refrigerator. So apples don't need to go in your refrigerator. They're happy out in a cold room. Now, I am in my garage where it's like 50 degrees right now, 50, 55, and that's just fine. I have my dried peppers. I have in here, I don't know if you can see all this, garlic and onions. And down here, I don't know if you can see, but I have my little baby potatoes. And then I have some russet potatoes in the basket down here. And it's important, these are baskets and they have a lot of air circulation. So that's good for those crops. And in the bottom, I have next year's potatoes. These are a purple heirloom fingerlings. And those are my seed potatoes with calendula flowers all scattered around in there. But when you do have your food in a root cellar, you need to go down about at least once a month to do a check on everything. I mean, you're using stuff and pulling stuff out. But if you go down there and you see that, oh, you have a green potato, that's toxic. So don't eat that one, throw it away. Or if you notice that you have one bad apple, get that out of there because it can spoil the whole batch, right? So you kind of have to look through your boxes and crates. And if you are looking over your seed potato and you realize you have one that's, shriveled and rotten, or green and toxic, you should toss it. So there's a lot of root cellar ideas. And this is the book that I chose to use as my guide. There are tons of books, and I'm going to show you a few with different processes here. But just go pick one and use that as a guide, because it's just going to be a springboard for you as you learn how to do these things on your own. You will find what works for you and with your resources.
Esther, can you show the author?
Yes. And I apologize not having my slides and things yet. I will get those out to Michelle later this evening so she can send them to you.
And Nancy Bubel, Bubel.
So find a book. It doesn't have to be that book. Any book that you can on root cellaring, and just start studying. Now, when I was living with my aunt and uncle, they had a root cellar before they had refrigeration. And it was a old Ford cargo van that my uncle dug a hole in the side of the hill. He drove the van into the bank, put a roof over it, packed it all with earth, and then he built wooden doors on the outside. So we had double doors. We had to open up the big wooden doors, close those, and then we can open up the back of the van door. And that's where my aunt stored all of her garden produce and all those apples and things that my mom and brothers gleaned, and her canning jars and things like that to keep them from freezing. But to keep them out of the house, the small cabin that was heated with wood and very warm. So the killers for your food storage are light, moisture, and heat. So if you can keep the temperature down as low as you can without freezing these things, with the exception of butchering, we'll talk about that, do that after your first frost and you freeze outside, you can hang and store some meat outside. So anyways, I also have on the back side of this cabinet a whole shelf full of squash and pumpkins and baby squash. These things keep for like 6 months to a year. Butternut squash store really, really nice. And spaghetti squash I've had for up to a year, even in a normal living condition, not out here in the house. So your squashes can can be saved for a long time, and you can have this sweet meat. Okay. All right, so the only other thing I want, you can make a little refrigerator at the last slide on the bottom.
I'm not
There's-
showing the slide, but yeah,
Okay. And then
there's-
we'll just make it bigger here.
that's fine.
Right down here, and you can make, this is how they started with ice boxes, this concept anyways, many different configurations, but you put your ice on the top because cool air sinks and hot air rises, and you get this circulatory system going here. And it's a great way to go. That's why they used to have ice block houses, and people would go get their ice blocks. All right, so
Do you have a bunch more slides, or do you want me to go to?
we're going to go to the next slide here.
Okay, so I'm gonna start. I'm gonna go put Esther back on screen, and I'm gonna
Okay.
back up.
So this next slide, we're going to talk really fast about wet food preservation methods. Okay. And the first one on there is an All-American pressure canner. And I have one, but it's up in its box. And I was too lazy to get it down to show you. So if you look at that picture of the All-American canner, you see that it has little black kind of toggles all the way around the lid. That canner does not have a rubber seal. So you have to put a little thin layer of oil or Vaseline around there when you use that. So that difference in there is because the other pressure canner, the Presto pressure canner, and there's other brands as well, but that technology uses a rubber gasket, and those rubber gaskets fail. And so it's good to have the All-American canner, which is more expensive. So if you're going to start with something you can afford. And that's what I did with the Presto canner, and then we've upgraded. So let me show you what I'm talking about with the pressure canner.
Okay.
So can you see that, Dave?
Yeah. Let me switch this around.
So this is the rubber gasket that usually fails on these canners. Okay. And the pressure canners are the only way you should pressure can your meats. Okay. And I have here's a recent jar of ground hamburger that I pressure canned in that pressure canner. So they didn't used to recommend pressure canners. There was a lot of problems, but now we have all these little safety valves and things here. There's a little safety thing here. There's a blowout valve here. You have your pressure canner gauge, and then you have a weight that you put right here. About 10 minutes after you start processing. And you put very little water. There's an indicator line in the pressure canner, and there are a ton of YouTube videos. So if you are a visual learner, just go on YouTube and watch pressure canning videos. So the pressure canner is for low acid foods. Okay, so your vegetables, your meats, and if you're doing any kind of soups or sauces that have vegetables or meats, even if it's just a little bit, you need to use a pressure canner to get that temperature up to kill the bad bacteria so you don't have botulism later when you open that jar. So the next food preservation you see is the water bath canner. Are they looking at the slide now?
I think so.
Okay.
Hope so. It's hard for me to tell.
So if you're looking at the slide, you can see the water bath canner. And it's the black one. Now, in the pressure canners that I told you about, you put very little water because it creates steam and pressure. In the water bath canner, jars are completely submerged. So you have to have 1 to 2 inches above the jars, and they have to be sealed. And then you use that for your processing time. And then the next slide, there's a steam canner. Let's see if I can show you this one because it's kind of interesting. Because it's kind of upside down. Because your big lid here actually looks like the bottom of a can. And you only put like 1 inch or 2 of water. You can see the water line there. And you can only use this for your high acid foods. This and the water bath canner. High acid foods only. Fruits, pickled vegetables that have vinegar, or your jams and jellies. So with canning, you're going to need some tools. So it's easy to just go pick up a kit like this. Can they see the camera now? And you have your tongs for when you're removing jars from these canners. You need something so you're not going to get scalds and burns. A funnel, and this long piece here is actually just a kind of a plastic knife, but it has a gauge here because you have to leave a certain amount of headspace when you're canning certain products, and that helps you know how much headspace you have in the jar. Now, you also have canning lids and rings, wide mouth and regular mouth. Now, I have this box is from 2014, and I used to have to put these in hot boiling water. And now with the new technology, they say you don't have to warm them up anymore. You can just put them in water or rinse them and then use them. But I have to use the old rules for my old lids. And you know what? Even 6 years later in storage, they're just fine. So the other thing I do before I need to go up a little. Is I wipe every jar with vinegar, every rim of the jar with vinegar to clean it and get any grease or anything that could prevent a perfect seal around there. And so I just pour vinegar in a little glass dish like this and use a clean paper towel. And if it gets dirty, I replace it. And then when I'm done with that, I actually put that vinegar water in the canner, and this helps prevent your jars from getting all cloudy on the outside, especially if you have hard water. So with these canning lids, these are just the regular Kerr or ball canning lids with that rubber seal. And they say you should not use these over and over, but you have to decide if you're in a grid down situation and you take that off, if you can warm it up and get that seal to soften enough to where you could reuse it. You can always try. If the jars don't seal, then it didn't work and you eat fast. Or you can try again with newer jars, newer lids, sorry. Also, you have to make sure that your canning rings are not dented. I don't know if you can see that in the camera, but there is a dent right there, and there's a bigger one right here. Now, that kind of a dent will not put enough pressure on the ring, and it will cause your jars to not seal. And all that hard work of growing or processing, whether it's animals or your vegetables, will be lost. So don't use damaged equipment. Also have spare parts. Okay. So have extra gaskets and togglers and all of that. Was there any questions on that part?
There's a few little ones, but I think you just go ahead and keep going. You have 15 minutes left.
Oh, okay. We got to speed. So the other thing is, and I'm going to try to bring my cart closer. Actually, Dave, can you zoom over here? So here are some other things that I have pressure canned. This is apple smoked bacon. This is ground sausage for sausage biscuits and gravy. And you can see that there's a big layer of fat there, and that's okay because you need fat. There was a starvation diet when people only ate rabbits during the war because that's all they could get. And rabbits in the wild don't have a lot of fat. So people were not getting the fat they needed. Here are pork chops. And here's raw packed chicken, which we use all the time. Then I have that ground beef I showed you. And then I tried to do barbecued pulled pork. This experiment didn't work very well because during the 90-minute process time, the barbecue sauce with brown sugar baked and actually burned a little in the jar. So it's still palatable. You can put it on a cracker, like a little hors d'oeuvre with a little bit of cream cheese, and it's good. But you're not going to put it on a big, like 2 pieces of bread and chow down like you would normally for a barbecued pork sandwich. So it's important to have these meats, and I'm going to come back to that, but we're going to just zoom over here really quick to fermenting. Now, I'm pretty comfortable with canning, but my next goal, my next skill set that I want to learn is fermenting. So I've purchased my fermenting jar with a little gadget on the top, weights that have a handle of some sort. If you just get the flat glass weights, then it's very difficult to get them out of the jar. So get ones with knobs or some that have an inset so you can reach down and pull it out. And here's the book that I am currently trying to use to start fermenting. And I'm going to start with sauerkraut. I tried it years ago and the recipe called for caraway seeds and I didn't like it. So you have to make sure that you preserve stuff that you will eat. So you have to experiment, and now's the time to get the supplies that you need. So if you have to experiment in downgrade situation, at least you have the supplies, okay? And so even though I don't have the skill set yet, I do have the supplies to get started. And with that, in your dry storage, you're going to need salt, and you're going to need iodized salt. It's really important. However, you do not use iodized salt in your canning or in your ferments because the iodine will kill the enzymes in your ferments. So you just need to use any kind of sea salt, kosher salt, Himalayan salt, whatever in your ferment, just to get the juices and liquids out of whatever vegetable you're trying or fruit you're trying to ferment. Okay, so, and then this is a really old book I have on herbal vinegars, and it has directions for buying, making, and flavoring different vinegars. And it's an older book. But anyways, it's what I have, and you find one that you can use as a reference guide because that's where you're going to go. And then you can make your own. If you already use apple cider vinegar, you see that there's kind of a cloudiness in there. That's called the mother. And that's really beneficial for your body and digestive system. So we want to make sure that we have really good health at all times, but especially down grid or grid down situation. So we're not going to have the doctor's office. Okay. Next thing is apple cider. So I've done apple cider before, and then I've canned it, and it was wonderful. And then the next thing on that slide is fat. You need to have fat, and you need to learn how to render fat. This just happens to be bacon grease. and it's shelf stable. And I did this in April 25th, shortly after this pandemic started. So we've got that. And I decided I need a new reference book just on fat. So I have this book here called The Fat Kitchen, and it's excellent so far. I've looked through it, and it has how you can render lard, which is pig fat, tallow, which is beef fat, schmaltz, which is chicken fat, duck fat, all kinds of fats that you will need in your diet because you're not going to the grocery store getting your canola oil, or olive oil is all we use, or coconut oil. Those stores are going to run out and you're going to have to learn how to replace it. So, okay, next slide.
You want me to go back to showing slides?
Yes. So the next slide, really quick. How much time do I have, Michelle?
You have like 8 minutes before Q&A.
Okay, so you also have dry storage, and so on that slide on the top, you will number 4. You will see a Foodsaver with a jar attachment, and I don't know, Dave, if you could go to camera now. So with the Foodsaver, it's pretty simple. You put your product in the jar, you put your lid on, you put the Foodsaver lid on, you turn this on, and it sucks all the air out. And when it's done, you turn it off and take this off, and your lid will be sealed. And so here's an example of that. This jar right here has freeze-dried pineapple in it. Okay, so let me grab something that's not freeze-dried. We have raisins that you can seal in jars. You can seal, actually dry seal anything. Nuts to put in your root cellar, your cold storage. They do better there. And then any of your beans and flours and grains, and you can store any of that in these vacuum sealed jars. And the next slide is a dehydrator, and I have one right up here. And I don't know if Dave can see that right now. I just have calendula flowers on this dehydrator. And this is not the expensive. This is just an Garden Master brand. So you can get these for like around $50. And they just have circular trays that circulate the air, and you can get flat screens, or you can also just get flat solid sheets that you can use for fruit leather and purees and things like that.
Request to just go to Esther's camera if you can, so that we can see better what she's doing.
Oh,
Okay.
okay. So this is the Garden Master dehydrator. I have different colored trays just because I had an older dehydrator that went bye-bye, and I used the trays that were interchangeable. So anyways, you can dehydrate your herbs. Right now I have calendula on there for a salve that I want to make. You can dehydrate your herbs for your cooking, for your teas. I have a very old book. I don't know if it's still in print or not. But you can find lots of books on drying and dehydrating. Now I can use the dehydrator when I have electricity, but without electricity, you have to go to the slide below that where, so when we show that slide again, you'll see someone who has trays and trays of food drying in the sun. And there's instructions on how to do that too. The other book I have, actually I have several on medicinal things, but this I have for making different kinds of herbal teas and all the different herbs that you can learn to grow and have in your apothecary. So, all right. So the next thing I wanted to talk about are curing meats. So that is another skill set that I want to learn. So I do have a vertical smoker in my shed, but we have some shelf stable meats. Now this looks like it needs to be refrigerated, but this particular salami doesn't need to be refrigerated until you've opened it and broken that seal. So you need to protect the packaging in another container so it doesn't get pierced. These are summer sausages. They also do not need refrigeration. And if you have 4 boys and 2 adult, so 6 adults in my family, this is going to be gone in one meal if that's what we have. And then you have pepperoni. So pepperoni and dry salami, those are fermented. And this is dry cured. You can also get shredded beef now at Costco. This is 3 pounds for $10 of shredded beef in this Mylar bag. It's ready to eat. Just protect your packaging and anything that has plastic. Suzanne touched on that. Get yourself a book. I need to get another one because this particular book goes a lot into processing your animals and wild game, but it does not go into depth or detail about curing with fermentation of your meats, which is a really old way to preserve meats. And that's why you have Italian salami and all Moderno salami and all these different brands coming from different countries. So when you want meats, you want to make sure that you have several different ways to preserve them. So smoking is a good option. Okay. So this slide is a little, can you go back to slides? This slide is a little out of place, but we're going to do this in 2 minutes or less because Suzanne talked on this too. I'll show you just 2 books that I have. I have way more on gardening and winter gardening.
Garden, or what do you want to show?
Yeah, fly, number 5.
Okay.
Okay. Is that, so this year,
They can't see it from my slides.
sorry, there are plenty of books out there that talk about winter gardening. This is one. And she's in my area.
Make sure you have your mic up to your mouth.
Sorry, this is one book, and this particular author is gardening in my area in the Pacific Northwest. Caleb Warnock grows in the mountainous regions of Utah, and he has a geothermal greenhouse where he can grow during the winter. And he has seeds that are acclimated to growing in winter. Also, oops, I'm just going to drop that on the floor there. I don't have enough hands. This book right here is like the seed saving Bible.
We need you to use your mic. I'm sorry.
They can't hear if your mic
This is
in
the
your mouth.
seed saving Bible, seed to seed. Everyone should have this book. So I will make sure that you get that. And it tells you how to save all the different types of seeds. Some need to go through different processes before they can sprout. And
By
so,
Suzanne Ashworth.
so you need to have a good trusted book. And I trust this book here. So like the previous presenter talked about saving seed. This right here is from cilantro. And you can see these little bitty balls there. Those are the seeds, and we call it coriander. But that can grow cilantro next year. Or you can use it as the coriander spice. Right now, where I'm at, you can still put garlic in the ground. So this is my garlic seed, and get it in the ground, and it's ready next summer. So you may think some people have different timelines. You're in different places. But I would encourage you to still be growing a garden right now and planning for the summer. So if you're still home, you've gained a new skill and you're harvesting something. Okay. So grow a garden with your family, teach your kids. It's great. You can do square foot gardening. You can pluck it in buckets. You can put it on your patios in your apartments. You can do sprouts and microgreens and things like that, but you also need seeds. So some people look at these and go, oh, that's an ammo box, but not for me. That's my food security for the next season and some of my seed packets. So I have it all organized according to herbs and root crops and lettuce crops and leafy greens and squash and all that stuff in there. And so this gets nice and sealed. And if we ever have to leave, this is going with me. It's all ready to go. And I have a lot more seeds, but this is my garden's worth if I have to grow somewhere else and start a new garden somewhere. So, and I also keep some of these mycorrhizae micros because I have found that I have a lot better production with using these when I put them around the roots of my newly planted little starts out in the garden. They just grow massive root systems and get really strong and healthy and produce more produce. So I keep this in there as well. Because right now, if you look at your soil, gardening soils and things like that, they'll say with mycorrhizae and all the wonderful benefits that they found that it helps with growing your plants. So there was one thing I didn't show on the dry food preservation, and that was the freeze dryer in the right-hand corner. And the reason I want to cover that really quick, I don't know if Dave can get a picture of it way over there, but it looks just like the one in the picture. Okay.
There's no picture.
Okay. So look up Harvest Right freeze dryers. And I have a wonderful sister who's letting me borrow her Harvest Right freeze dryer. And I am learning this skill right now. So these right here are freeze dried carrot for my carrot cake that I bake in my Dutch ovens, my cast iron Dutch ovens. And then I have the pineapple down there that goes with them and the raisins. And then for frosting, I need to have, let me see the screen again. I need to have my freeze dried cream cheese. Okay. Because that's my cream cheese frosting. And I need to have my sour cream for that recipe. So right here, Suzanne talked about milk. And if you're in a grid down situation, you cannot, you got to get down to this one right here.
There you go.
Okay. So you can buy shelf stable milk. This is Natrel. We weren't real wild about it, but if you're in a grid down situation, it's just sweeter. My husband uses rice milk already because he's lactose intolerant. And you can buy children's organic whole milk that's shelf stable, as well as evaporated milk. This one's not organic, but you can use this to make baby formula. And you have your canned coconut milk. All right. So the reason I have this turntable here is so that you can also see other things that I've preserved. And this is why I love the freeze dryer, because my kids love pizza. And here's mozzarella, shredded mozzarella, ready to go. Here's cheddar cheese for our enchiladas and tacos. Here's freeze-dried eggnog, so we can have that special treat at Christmas time. Here is cottage cheese and pineapple, because that's a comfort food for me. And here is organic omega-3 raw eggs for baking. And you can also rehydrate them and scramble them just like normal eggs and put them in whatever recipe you have. You can also buy canned cheese, Bega canned cheese. This is an Australian product and it's wonderful. We've used it in a grid down camping tests, and you can also buy sealed and cheese that doesn't need to be refrigerated until opened. And again, you have to protect the packaging there. You can buy canned Parmesan cheese from Walmart. Okay. And another skill someday I'll learn, but I have wax now. Okay. So if you want to learn a skill, get your supplies now, even if you don't have time, is this is for cheese. It's cheese wax. Okay. And I have more than one little brick. But having your dairy products for baking, if you're used to that, then you need to have a way to store it. And that's why I'm really focusing on freeze drying right now, because I have electricity right now. And so I am using that electricity to try to provide my family with some of those things until I can convince my husband to get a cow or partner with somebody else sometime in the future. He likes his ice cream. So I think with our hand crank ice cream maker or a can to kick around, he'll come around sometime.
Awesome, Esther. Well, you are amazing. I just let you continue go through your Q&A time because I wanted you to get to everything. There's a lot of questions on here. So what I think we'll do is just have you answer them as a typed out document, and we'll send everybody all of your answers. There's also some great comments online that I'm seeing, and we'll include those all the comments as well as your answers to questions. So
Okay.
this has been so great. You have covered so many things in a very short amount of time. And
I
that's
tried.
awesome.
I do want to show the last slide number 9 before we end.
Okay.
Remember, it wasn't raining when Noah built the ark. Okay, so we can do what we can now. If you have felt inspired in any way to prepare your family like Noah did, then prepare like Noah did. And many of us in all our different religious backgrounds are probably familiar with the story of Noah's Ark. And there were a lot of people that did not heed his counsel, and they perished. So we can learn from that and have faith to go forward. And because all of this can be overwhelming, and the best preparation for tomorrow is doing your best today. And so if you have a good day and you go learn how to plant something, or you learn how to preserve something, or you just get online and you purchase a tool that you need, whatever you can do to help prepare your family, or you watch some YouTube videos, those are very educational. And you find if you can also can milk and can your own cheese. And I have done that. It's different, but you can do that. So anyways, do your research now while you can, and get your supplies while you can. Like, there's jar shortages, but if you keep looking and you're praying, I can tell you I have this cupboard here. My goal was to fill this cupboard with enough jars. It is completely full of jars for all my freeze drying that I'm trying to accomplish. And behind that, I have found case after case here and there in my area, just by praying and saying, God, let me know where to find these supplies. So if you ask in sincerity, believing that that you will receive answers, he will give you those answers, and he'll help you find, what your passion or where your talents or skills lie in preserving food for your family. And you can share that with other people, and we can share our knowledge and skills and help, each other. So find a good buddy. That's one of the things in canning. I did not start out on my own. I was with my mother and my grandmother. And when I was an adult, I invited women to learn new skills with me. So we had canning parties, and then we would have pizza at the end, or chocolate or dessert or something. And that's a great way to get to learn how to do these skills, is to find a buddy, which may be in this situation of coronavirus, a family member, or someone online that you can Zoom with or chat with. Anyways, I hope this was all helpful, and I hope you learn to live happily. And there's a little part about laundry. And I'll get all that information to Michelle. I'm sorry I was late on that. And you can figure it out, but you can save a lot of money making your own laundry soap so that you can afford all these supplies.